A trauma response is the automatic and reflexive use of coping mechanisms in any real or perceived presence of danger. The 4 trauma responses include fight or flight, as well as freeze and fawn. When we experience something traumatic or have been exposed to prolonged bouts of stress, our brain goes into overdrive, aka spiraling. That also causes us to see and feel threats in non-threatening situations. We often respond in ways the brain thinks will help you survive the situation. But just because you think that's what's going to help you survive the situation doesn't mean that that's what's going to help you survive the situation, nor does that even mean that there's a situation to be survived in the first place. Why do we need to understand this first? First of all, it's so that we can stop being in survival mode. When we are not doing our healing work, we can have an overactive trauma response and not even know it. And so day-to-day occurrences and interactions or events most people don't find threatening can trigger your trauma responses. Overactive trauma responses are totally common, especially if you've been exposed to a lot of stress, neglect, trauma, abuse, and so forth. The more we do our healing work, the less we will project our previous experiences onto the present. Then we can see what is the trauma story and what's the actual truth. This is what will prevent us from repeating patterns of self-sabotage and ultimately set us free. The freeze response is a kind of automatic reflexive playing dead response, and it manifests as an inability to speak, communicate, think, or take action in the face of actual or perceived danger. The freeze response is common for those who experience a lot of fear in response to stressors. The fear response shuts down the body, right? Causing the person to literally feel stuck or frozen. For example, if you felt unsafe or unprotected by your parents or caregiver as a child from a young age, you may have a tendency to freeze. When you are unable to fight or flee, then the panic button activates, making the person numb, stuck, immobile, frozen, etc. Let's talk about a few different ways that the freeze response can manifest. Obviously, feeling stuck, cold, numb in certain parts of your body, which very much overlaps with dissociation. Heaviness in the chest, body, or limbs. Inability to respond. Shutting down, getting quiet, can't make a decision, avoiding eye contact, feeling blank or having no emotions, ghosting, running away, thinking about all the things you should have done after it passes, and then beating yourself up afterwards for everything that you could have done. The fawn response is a response to a threat by becoming more appealing to the threat. The fawn response responds by abandoning your own needs in an attempt to appease the threat and avoid conflict, criticism, or disapproval. It's associated with people-pleasing, codependency, and lack of boundaries. And with that, I'll end on this quote. The fawn response unconsciously believes that the price of admission to any relationship is the forfeiture of all their needs, rights, preferences, and boundaries. Here are some sneaky ways that the fawn response manifests. 1, not speaking up when you feel uncomfortable. Inability to set boundaries or say no. Wanting to break up the tension and make everyone get along. Canceling your own plans or needs for someone else or a partner. Never having an opinion or preference, whatever you want. Over apologizing and begging for forgiveness. Giving compliments to appease the abuser. Making decisions to please your parents. Walking on eggshells so the other doesn't get mad. Being thirsty as fuck. And shape-shifting. So let's talk about how to make it stop real quick. First, know that it's normal and that it's like not your fault. We are animals. And so we see things, we respond to things, it's automatic, we are surviving. So all of these responses are things that we learn to survive and adapt. So in many ways, your trauma responses got you very far. Thank goodness for those mechanisms. Now that we know better, know that your brain isn't naturally oversensitive or overactive. Your brain made a decision somewhere in the past because you went through something awful. So if I simplify it even more, it's so liberating, right? Because you're like, oh, this is just programming and you can change it. And that in itself, hopefully, can help you feel a little more free. So with that said, do the work to heal and intentionally choose practices, rituals, exercises, and routines that regulates your nervous system. Exercise, meditation, dance, yoga, art, singing, and all the other things that you can do as well. So this is how we heal. And then we just repeat it over and over and over again. You practice. That's why it's called a practice, because repetition rebuilds your response systems.